What's up everybody, this is the 2023 Alfa Romeo Stelvio Estrema. So about the Estrema version of the Stelvio. Well, this is a new trim here for the 2023 model year, and it adds basically all the sportiest stuff that you can get on a Stelvio all in one package here in one trim level with the Estrema. And so as far as the Stelvio overall, it's in its 6th model year, and I still think though it is aged very gracefully. It still looks really attractive, very nice, but I am eager to see if we get the same new headlights and taillights that Europe is getting this year. That would be a really nice improvement to freshen up the look a little bit, but as it is here, it still looks great, I think, and especially in this Mazzano blue color, it really pops. I love this. It's got so much metallic flake in it, just looks so good. But anyway, the exclusive things here for the Estrema version are that on the exterior, you're going to get that carbon fiber insert there in the Alfa Romeo grille, which still looks great. I still love that design. And then otherwise here, you see you have the body painted moldings, which is something you also get on the Veloce model. This kind of builds upon that lower Veloce model. And so you also get these 21-inch wheels here, which is even 1 inch larger than the Veloce, and they're really cool looking. And you also have the black calipers with the white Alfa Romeo script on them. You also have these carbon fiber mirror caps and the Estrema badge here on the fender. You also get black badging and trim along with the black roof. And so again, especially with vehicles that have, the contrasting paint colors, it really stands out nicely. And then going out to the back there, you'll see that you have a rear diffuser there and a little bit of a sportier look than a regular Stelvio. And I still love how you also have the very thick walled exhaust tips there. It's a really unique and cool look. And you also have a pretty aggressive stance with this thing running 255 wide tires all around. It really does stand out as well with those. And so overall, I think it really just adds a little bit of extra spice to the already very good looking Stelvio here. And overall, I think it's a really nice package here on the outside. The interior in the Stelvio is still very nice, and if you're an enthusiast especially, I mean, it doesn't get much better than this in a family compact crossover. It's got all the fundamentals nailed, while also getting a nice improvement back in 2020 to give you some nicer materials, some better technology. So I'm going to briefly run over all that stuff, but most of the other stuff here is pretty familiar if you're used to Stelvio interiors. But anyway, the first thing is these seats. You have these wonderful Italian leather seats, and here with the Estrema version, you get the adjustable bolstering here with these seats. These are these sport seats, and these sport seats are available previously in other trims and option packages in past model years, but I love these seats. You can have them as wide or as tight as you like, and they are a little bit on the firmer side just to give it a sportier vibe, but they're still totally comfortable. I've had no complaints driving around in these this week. Just absolutely love these seats. This steering wheel is another work of art that I love staring at and using. I mean, it has basically one of the most perfect 9-3 grips I've encountered, especially in anything in this segment. It feels so good to use. I love having the engine start button here right on the steering wheel as well. It's really cool. And it's also amazing that it's uncluttered with buttons. So many other steering wheels these days have a million buttons on them, and just a few here, it does all the stuff you need it to do and nothing excessive. I love that. I also love these paddle shifters. I think there are supercars, many supercars actually, that have smaller paddle shifters than you get here in the Stelvio Estrema. I love these. Again, another thing that's been around, for all these years with the Stelvios and various other packages, but I love these. I mean, they're thick metal, have a great sound to them, and they feel so good to use as well. The only minor nitpick I will say is they do sometimes slightly block your access to these other stocks behind them. You kind of have to make sure that your fingers are in the right position to maneuver around these massive paddles, but I'm more than happy to do a little bit of extra maneuvering to have these glorious paddle shifters. They're so awesome, and I love having them, and this is still the gold standard as far as steering wheels, especially in this segment, goes. I love the whole setup. The gauges are also fantastic here. They're still just the analog gauges, the little digital portion there that's pretty limited with its customization and stuff, but gives you all the basics. I still love the fonts, the dials, everything looks really great. And if you are someone who wants, something a little more modern feeling, they are going to be having the fully digital gauge cluster, I believe, for the next model year here. That was already revealed again in Europe, so that'll be nice. They're the same digital gauges out of the Tonale. That'll be a great improvement, but I still have no complaints with these gauges still. Yes, they might feel a little dated these days, but they still work fantastic. Nothing wrong with them in my opinion. Another thing, know, this is one of the few interiors these days that doesn't have a giant tablet just stuck onto the top of the dashboard. And having this screen integrated is really nice. And so, you know, by the numbers, the screen measures at 8.8 inches. Now, it feels a little smaller than that, but the great thing for 2020 is they gave it some touchscreen functionality. So now you can use the touchscreen or the controller to do everything on there, and they also revised the menu structure and all that, and it works okay. I will say that it's not the most intuitive, and it is a little laggy every once in a while, so certainly not the best out there. I will say, though, I prefer this over the setup in the Acura RDX, which forces you to use a finicky little touchpad instead. This is so much easier, especially with CarPlay and things like that, where, you know, touching stuff is much easier. So I think this is a really solid system. It's not the best out there, but I think it's totally fine, especially now that it has the touch functionality and does all the basics you want it to do. It does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Unfortunately, it is not wireless Apple CarPlay or wireless Android Auto. That's the only other downside of that. But aside from that, you know, it's really a fine system in my opinion. And certainly, you know, yes, you might be missing out on tech compared to some of the other competitors, but you know, I think it's totally livable. And it's hooked up to this really nice sounding 14 speaker Harman Kardon stereo, which gives you a nice subwoofer in the back there. And then just, you know, a few basic climate controls, and everything just still feels pretty good. You know, some of the knobs and stuff are a little loose feeling still. So, you know, it's still not fantastic, but I'd say it's, you know, certainly an improvement over the pre-refresh interiors in these, you know, in the 2018s and 2019s. And here in the Estrema, you also have the red stitching and all the genuine carbon fiber trim, which is an expensive option to have real carbon fiber, and really does elevate this interior as well to make it feel much more expensive, because it's a lot of carbon. You have it on the doors, the dash, a huge piece on the dash, and here in the center you have just basic pockets in the doors. You have a nice deep set of cup holders there, and also even a wireless charging pad, which is now standard here these days. You also have this nicely padded center armrest, and you open that up and you'll see a good amount of space in there. Not a huge amount, but you know, pretty par for the course in this segment, and also some hookups there. And so I mean, you know, overall it's a pretty nice feeling interior. I think that, you know, if you go for a lower trim or a base trim, you know, it certainly can feel a little cheaper. The first Stelvio I reviewed several years ago had a much cheaper feeling interior. The dash didn't have the leather covering it and stuff. This feels much more expensive and a very, you know, I guess warmer and exciting interior to be in than a base one. So certainly I think it's worth the extra money to go up to these higher trim levels if you are considering one of these. And so just really great up front here. Also here you have the double pane moonroof here. That's another thing you get with the Estremas as well. And the back seat here in the Stelvio is still, you know, one of the tighter ones in its segment, but me being 5'9", sitting behind myself, I still have a couple inches of legroom to spare. My wife did comment that the seating position is a bit too upright there in the back, and she didn't feel super comfortable in that back seat. So just one thing to, you know, keep in mind there, and you'll want to maybe try that out if you're considering one of these. But aside from that, you know, good amount of space, good headroom. You also have dedicated air vents, and here in the Estrema you even get heated rear seats, and also you know, a power outlet there. And one thing though I have to mention is that you know, even a vehicle like this one's over $60,000. It's like $61,500, and there is, like, you'll see that little tray there under the air vents there. It doesn't fit perfectly, and this vehicle only has a few thousand miles on it. I'm just kind of surprised that, you know, things like that don't fit together perfectly, but that's the only other little thing I can say. Otherwise, you know, really great back seat. Cargo space is also pretty good. Now, it is, by the numbers, again, just a tiny bit smaller than some of the other competitors out there, but as you can see, it's still, you know, should be plenty of room, you know, totally fine, I think, for this segment. A few little tiny little cubbies underneath the floor there as well, and nice little bag hooks and things too. And so I'd say it's totally fine, but you know, something like an Acura RDX certainly has a little bit more space, as does even like a Genesis GV70, I think, but still should be fine, I think, for most people. But let's start up and go for a drive. The Stelvio here has this really nice Alfa Romeo key, and it's pretty thick, but just has a really nice feel to it. Just a few buttons there on the back of it, and so I still really like this key, even though it is a bit of a, you know, chunk in your pocket. But anyway, it's of course keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So you leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button right here on the steering wheel, and it starts right up. Alright, so setting off here in the Stelvio. So the first thing that I think you're going to notice the first time you turn the wheel on this thing is the fast steering ratio that this has, which isn't something that usually stands out in any other vehicles, but in this thing, it has a 12-to-1 steering ratio, which I think has got to be by far the quickest in the industry, at least as far as this compared to its competitors goes. And so what that means is that it just takes a lot less movement of the wheel in order to get the turning that you want to do. And so it's really funny because I actually, when I first got in this vehicle and started driving for the first time, I had to recalibrate my steering inputs compared to anything else that I'm usually in, where you usually can, you know, move your hands about the same amount and it'll do the same amount of steering. And this, I was like, no, I gotta like slow my movements down because this thing is really darty if you turn it as much as you know, turn your hands with any other steering setup. And so it just gives the whole vehicle an eager and a sportier feel, and it just feels like it wants to do, you know, what you want it to do just that much more aggressively. And it's not overkill. It's certainly easy to still be smooth with, and you just have to get used to it, and it happens very quickly to even get used to it. But it really stands out to me, and I still love that about the Stelvio. It's just so fun to have this fast steering. Other things here though that are really impressive is the ride. On these massive 21-inch wheels, I looked at this thing when it showed up in my driveway and I was like, oh boy, it's gonna be a rough ride this week. And no, it wasn't. I'm really surprised. Now, you do get with the Estrema here the adaptive dampers along with the rear limited slip differential. Those are the unique things here for the Estrema this year. The Veloce doesn't get the rear LSD anymore. It did get it last year, but now you have to go up to the Estrema to get that. Previously, you could get those two things in other sport package vehicles in the past, but they've eliminated a lot of those packages. So now the only way to get those two things is here in the Estrema. And I gotta say, you know, obviously you're gonna have smaller wheels with the lower versions of the Stelvio, so you probably won't have as much of a, you know, ride issue that you need to fix with the adaptive dampers. But with the adaptive dampers, I can just say that on 21-inch wheels, this thing still rides really smoothly. And I love with the adaptive dampers too, you know, you have them obviously in a softer setting here for the normal and the all-weather kind of mode, but in the dynamic mode, you can still hit the middle of the mode selector here, and that'll soften up the damper so you can have everything else sharp and still have soft dampers, which is great if, you know, you're in a place where you're doing sporty driving on a bumpy road or something, or you just want that comfort. You have that here with this. And so I love you have that adjustability. Other things though, visibility isn't the best here in the Stelvio. You do have a pretty thick A-pillar with your mirrors there, and also the view out of the back is a little more narrow than it is in some of the other normal family crossovers. But I'm going to go ahead and put it up into the dynamic mode here, and I'm going to turn down onto this back road and see how it does. Here we go. All right, so a little bit of turbo lag still before it kicks in and goes nuts, and then it flies. And it's hilarious. This is the second time I've done it where I go full throttle and then it tells me my washer fluid is low. Only little gremlin I've had all week though. And it could actually be that the washer fluid is low and that just causes it to trigger that. I don't know, but I also love how you get a nice little growl out of this engine, and it really sounds nice for a four-cylinder, at least in my opinion. But anyway, it's the 2-liter turbocharged four-cylinder that Alfa's been using all throughout the Stelvio's life here, and it does 280 horsepower and 306 pound-feet of torque, which still does punch above its weight class typically. You know, most of the others in this segment, you know, might be able to match it almost on horsepower, but as far as the torque goes, I don't think any of them still crest over 300 pound-feet of torque like this does. And as a result, this is going to feel a little punchier than most of those others out there. And I believe that Motor Trend got a 5.4 seconds there to 60 in their testing with the Stelvios here. And so, I mean, it really feels nice and quick. I think the only thing about the engine I don't love is that it really wants to shift pretty early, and it looks like the red line is indicated around, you know, 5,500 or 6,000. So not a lot to play with there. Even the average turbo four-cylinder these days will rev to 6,500. So it's just, obviously with this 8-speed automatic you have, it's a ZF 8-speed, really reacts very quickly. And so, you know, you don't have to worry about at least, you know, waiting around for a shift or, you know, having that bog down the experience. But I just wish there was a little more breadth to the, you know, rev range here in the Stelvio. But I'm going to try out some manual shifts here to demonstrate this 8-speed auto here. So we'll go down to first, and here we go. Yeah, they're right there. You got these glorious paddle shifters to use that are so fun to use. But yeah, I think the manual shifts are great. It's definitely one of the best out there. I think BMW also uses the ZF 8-speed, and, you know, maybe one or two others, but it's really a fantastic transmission. It does everything you want it to do, and I love it. But anyway, coming up some corners here, again, still in dynamic mode. Let's see how the Stelvio Estrema handles. And this is one of the best things about the Stelvio, is it is one of the best handling, if not the best handling in its segment, at least as far as the non-performance variants in its segment is concerned. I mean, it just, again, that quick steering really pitches it in aggressively, but then it sticks thanks to these 255 wide tires here on the Estrema version especially, and the rear limited slip diff that really puts the power down really well coming out of corners. And it just all makes this thing feel so alive and so competent too. And this is one of the few vehicles where it it like eggs you on. It wants you to go faster. And I found myself over the week driving a little faster than I usually do, even though, I mean, this isn't like, you know, some hot rod with, you know, 280 horsepower, but just the handling encourages you because it has such high limits that you're not even used to in this segment. So you really appreciate just how much this thing is willing to just play around with you, and it is just, it's so impressive. And I love how this thing handles. Now, I will say that sometimes, you know, if I was going around, you know, an on-ramp at, you know, some elevated speed, the tires do tend to go towards the understeer side of things as you approach their limits, which is very safe. And so, you know, this never feels like it's too edgy or anything. It just does everything you want it to do. But I will certainly say that if I was driving one of these, I would probably upgrade to some performance all-season tires instead of these Continental all-seasons, which don't seem to be overly sporty. You know, so a little more grip up front would be maybe appreciated if you're really going to try and wring this thing out. But, you know, in 99% of, you know, average daily driving, you know, it's going to be way head and shoulders above all the other competitors as far as its handling threshold and, you know, what it can do and what it makes you feel like you can do as well, because it's just, you can just slice and dice up a back road, you know, no sweat, and it's fun, and, you know, you're barely even moving your arms because of the fast steering rack. And so I absolutely love these. I've loved them all 6 years that they've been around, but I just was reminded here this week of just how good this handles. And I've driven some of the other, you know, newer stuff these days, like the Genesis GV70. I love the GV70, but this, I mean, the GV70 can't touch the handling in this. This is still so much better, and it all just feels so good. It also helps that these, you know, have kept the weight in check over the years too. These only weigh, like, I think it's 4,018 pounds. That also really helps. Some of the others, you know, getting a little heavier these days. Having this, you know, still be fairly light, and again, the nice wide tires, the fast steering rack, it all just adds up. Plus the Alfa, you know, engineering expertise as far as, you know, they know how to make good handling vehicles, and so it all just adds up to just an absolutely amazing experience. And still, I don't think you can do better than the Stelvio if you like a good handling family crossover. And there's, you know, like the Acura RDX, I'm very impressed with that vehicle's handling as well, but I think this still is even above that. I think it's still an unbeatable proposition in this segment if you love good handling. Dynamic mode, by the way, also does give you quicker throttle response and also stiffer steering, so that gives you some extra weight here to the steering, and so that certainly does make it feel a little sportier as well. And I do like the dynamic mode, and especially if you use it with the manual shifters, then, you know, you don't have it constantly, you know, roaring at a higher engine speed. But if you do have it in automatic mode, it does really want to hang on to those lower gears, so it's not a kind of dynamic mode you can drive around in all the time unless you really want to, you know, kill your fuel economy with, you know, high revs constantly. But you know, if you use it with the paddle shifters, which is a ton of fun, then it's, you know, a really great experience all around. And we'll do one more acceleration here in the manual mode just for fun. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's a really good amount of power. It really is exhilarating, you know. Again, it seems very ho-hum with, you know, what everyone else is doing these days, aside from that torque being a little higher. But this thing really feels dynamic and exciting. I know, you know, some others have wished that there had been a mid-grade trim between this and the Quadrifoglio that has more power, and, you know, Alfa never provided us with that here. Yes, it'd be nice to see something with, you know, 350 or 400 horsepower or something, but, you know, you can't always go up to the Quadrifoglio version if you have the disposable funds for that. Those are fantastic as well. I drove one of those several years ago, and that really makes the experience that much better because you have a fantastic engine, plus even more extreme handling and all that. But, you know, for the average Stelvio here, these things are still just so much fun. And I also love that these paddle shifters are mounted to the steering column, which is getting rarer and rarer these days. But it's really a shame because I love how they're mounted to the column, because, you know, on mid-corner, I always know, you know, where the paddles are at, and I know, you know, where I can grab them and have that shift. And also, since they're so massive, even if my hands are on a different position of the wheel or something, you know, I always can just grab one part of the paddle and have that shift right there, you know, waiting for me. And so it's just, it's so set up. This is still hands down the driver's pick in the, you know, compact luxury SUV segment. No doubt about it in my mind. And it's also pretty quiet and refined in here too. Now, I don't think it's the quietest in its segment or anything, but, you know, this road is a little bit on the rougher side here, as you can see. It does generate some extra road noise, but still, you know, I'd say it's totally acceptable, especially for an entry-level luxury vehicle like this. And so, yeah, overall, I think it's, you know, a really nice daily driver in that regard as well. And as we're using the brakes here to slow down, one thing too about the brakes, so it is brake-by-wire, and some people don't love the brake feel. I personally thought it was a little wonky whenever I had a Giulia several years ago, but, you know, as I've used this all week, it's been very predictable, very easy to use. I think they might have improved, you know, the programming of that over the years as well, because I have no complaints as far as the braking goes. It still is very easy to be smooth. I did have trouble being smooth with the Giulia way back when, but with this week, I've had no problems being smooth. So I think they've really cleaned up the brake application here in these later model years, and it's been totally fine. I love the way the brakes feel, honestly. And also, while we're out on the highway here, just merging onto the highway now, I'm going to talk about the safety tech briefly. It's not, you know, crazy high tech or anything. It's just your basics, but you do have now, as standard for the 2023 model year, you have standard blind spot monitoring, you have automatic emergency braking, and also adaptive cruise control is now standard. Previously with Alphas, you would, you know, get various packages in order to have different levels of, you know, safety tech. Now it's all standard across the board, and that is, you know, very nice to have. The adaptive cruise worked fine all week, no problems, you know, with that. I just like driving this myself anyway, so it didn't even bother with the adaptive cruise very much. But, you know, it's nice that you do have all that stuff as standard now as well. And with all the nice meaty torque you get down low with this engine, it means that whenever you go to do a pass, I mean, it gains speed really nicely, and it's really great from a highway cruising standpoint as far as that goes. And noise-wise, you know, again, not the quietest in the segment, but still totally fine, especially once you got the stereo cranked up. No problem with that whatsoever. The only other impression I have here about the Stelvio during my week with it is that the auto stop start system still isn't great. It takes a little too long to get back up and moving whenever it, you know, wants to kick back on. And so I just found myself turning it off. There's a nice little button to turn it off though, and then, you know, you don't have to worry about it. It doesn't remember between key cycles, so you do have to hit it every time you get in the vehicle. But you know, it's just nice you can turn it off, because it just wasn't a great experience with the start-stop. But the last two things I mentioned here are the fuel economy and the pricing of the Stelvio Estrema. So first off, fuel economy. These are rated at 22 mpg in the city, 28 on the highway, and 24 combined. My driving was primarily suburban, around town stuff. There was a little bit of highway mixed in there, but not a ton. But anyway, I'm only getting 18.9 mpg, and I did, you know, do some idling to film this interior. So, you know, call it 19 or 19 and a half at least. And so that still, though, is, you know, a good bit under the 22, you know, that I was hoping to get here, I mean, at least for the city rating. But typically with my press loan vehicles here, I do end up getting, you know, at least 1 to 2 mpg less than the city rating typically. And this vehicle also I've been driving around here in the winter time, so that certainly doesn't help with the fuel economy either. So I'd say 19, you know, is totally fine still. And, you know, I was also getting on this a little more than the average, you know, vehicle that I have for a week as well. So that probably plays in a little bit as well. I've been having too much fun. But, you know, just worth noting, you know, you're not going to be getting stellar fuel economy in these, and there are some others that probably will get slightly better fuel economy, but this has, you know, again, that extra torque and the extra sportiness. And so I don't think there's any issue with that fuel economy. And then the last thing to mention, though, is the pricing and how it compares to its competitors. So as far as this one goes, this one, as tested, is like $61,580. And at that price point, it is a little bit of a tough sell. You can get a Stelvio, of course, for much less, but you just don't have the adaptive dampers, the limited slip diff, and, you know, all the other nice touches here of the Estrema. The Veloce, though, is a nice middle ground. It does give you a little bit of a sportier look and stuff. If you don't need to have, you know, the LSD and the adaptive dampers, and you're okay with, you know, slightly smaller wheels, that kind of strikes me as probably a little bit more of a reasonable proposition if, you know, you don't have to have the carbon fiber and all that stuff. You know, so that certainly, you know, brings down the price a few thousand, but that also still is a little pricier than I think, you know, these should be priced at personally. Now, I will say that Alfa Romeos typically do not go for MSRP, even in these years of, you know, everyone typically charging MSRP for everything. You know, it seems like there are some deals out there for Alfas, so keep that in mind whenever you consider the pricing of these. And also, I have to also point out that, you know, I would recommend probably, you know, leasing something like this more so than buying it, because these are a fantastic bargain on the used market, because they depreciate pretty quickly, and it's unfortunate because it's a fantastic vehicle, but they just don't hold their value as well as, you know, you would like them to. And so that is one of the things to, you know, keep in mind. But if you are, you know, open to a used one of these, you're not gonna be able to get the Estrema because these are brand new for the 2023 model year. But if you're not super picky on, you know, the exact type of Stelvio you're going to get. You know, on the used market, there are some phenomenal bargains to be had on these things. And if you think it's, you know, awesome at, you know, $60,000, it's, you know, even more awesome at 30 if you're okay with, you know, an older one with some miles on it or something like that. But, you know, just brand new, though, you look at the competitors, and again, this still hands down has the best handling in my opinion. So if best handling is what you're after, the money's probably worth it. But I do have to say that, you know, like the Genesis GV70 has the 3.5T version, which has 375 horsepower, you know, almost 100 more horsepower than this. Drop dead gorgeous looks, a very impressive interior that is definitely more impressive than this. Now, it doesn't handle as well, but you get all of that vehicle for about $57,000 or so. Basically, you know, very well equipped. Now, you can get those into the 60s as well if you fully load them up with, you know, digital gauges and stuff, which aren't available here in the Stelvio. So a comparable GV70 3.5T, though, would be, I'd say, in the, you know, 57 to 58 range. So it does undercut this a little bit. And if you don't need to have, you know, the extra 100 horsepower over this, a comparable, you know, which has very similar power to this 2.0T version of the GV70 is going to be, you know, way under this. And you can get that with a sport package as well if you'd like. So that still to me is the strongest value, and yes, you give up handling a little bit, and it doesn't excite me to drive as much as this does. So you're going to make a compromise there, you know, for that savings. But I will say that it's from a value standpoint, the GV70 seems to make more sense. Also, if you don't need to have the most power, the Acura RDX gives you a little bit more space and gives you very similar power. Fantastic handling as well in the RDX. I'd say that's probably the closest runner up to this in my opinion. But, you know, the RDX is another one where the interior, like I said, has a little bit of quirks as far as, you know, having that touchpad you have to use in that. So there is, again, some give and take with all of these, but you can get a pretty well equipped RDX which has, you know, adaptive dampers as well and things like that for about $55,000. Again, undercutting this. Now, you don't have all the carbon fiber stuff, and you don't have, you know, these massive glorious paddle shifters and, you know, other things. But if you are, again, looking for a little bit more of a bargain, I think that even a loaded RDX, you know, probably makes a little more sense from a value standpoint than this does. So, you know, it's really going to come down to the deal, I think, on these. If you get a really good new deal on these, they can certainly make sense new. 100% as a used value, out of the park, home run, you know, it's a fantastic used bargain. But brand new, it's really going to come down to your deal. If you can get a good deal on one of these things, 100% go for it. I love the Estrema package here for 2023. I still love the Stelvio just as much as I have. I still think it's one of the best ones, one of the most fun in its segment, and I love it to death. I still adore the Stelvio. You just got to make sure that, you know, you get a good deal on it so that you're not paying, you know, full MSRP, because I wish they would have brought the price down a little bit to make these competitive over the years. But anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the Stelvio. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Also, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to keep these videos coming. Also, huge thanks to Alfa Romeo for providing me here with this vehicle to review for you guys today. Yeah, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.